So these were the headings under which we'll be doing the descending tracts today. So the descending tract, as we had seen the sensory tract in the previous class, that was ascending up from the lower peripheral areas, and the sensory tract was ascending up to the higher center. But what happens in the descending tract is that the impulses, the motor impulses, are descending down from the higher centers, that is from the brain in case of corticospinal tract, and in case of extrapyramidal tracts, it will start from the brainstem area, and but the termination point will be common, that is both pyramidal and extrapyramidal will terminate at the level of the spinal cord. So they are motor in nature. These descending tracts are organized in form of columns in the white matter, as we had seen in the ascending tract, how they were arranged in the posterior funiculus, lateral and the anterior funiculus. Similarly, the descending tracts mainly are arranged in the anterior funiculus and the lateral funiculus. The two types of descending tracts are the pyramidal tract and the extrapyramidal tracts. Now look into the first picture. This is showing the schematic representation of a pyramidal tract. So it starts from the cerebral cortex, it descends down through the brainstem, and it reaches the spinal cord level. So the pyramidal tracts are beginning from the cerebral cortex, and they are involved in the voluntary movements, control of the precise voluntary movements. What happens in the extrapyramidal? Extrapyramidal tracts are taking its origin from the subcortical centers. That means away from the cortex, below the cortex of the brain. That is the region of the brain stem. They may arise from here. For example, this is showing one of the extrapyramidal tract, which is the rubrospinal, the red arising from the red nucleus of the midbrain. When these fibers descend down to the spinal cord or any other from any other brainstem area, then those are called as the extrapyramidal tract. So beginning from the subcortical regions of brain, these are the subcortical regions, and they are involved in the integration for the regulation of muscular movements and responsible for the muscle tone. Now, the descending tracts, as I've described, that they are arranged in the anterior and the lateral funiculus. Let's see what are those tracts, descending tracts. So this is the first tract, which is the lateral corticospinal tract along the lateral funiculus. In the anterior funiculus, most anterior, this is the ventral or the anterior corticospinal tract. These two, anterior and the lateral corticospinal tract, is basically the pyramidal tract. The extrapyramidal ones are the rubrospinal, olivospinal, lateral, the vestibulospinal, tectospinal, and reticulospinal. Devendra Krishna. Now, starting with the pyramidal tracts. Pyramidal tracts are the corticospinal fibers which occupy the pyramid region of the medulla. So this, I'll show, this is the region of the brainstem, and the lowermost part of the brainstem, this is called as the pyramid. So you can see in the anteriormost part of the pyramid, these are the swellings, which are basically the pyramidal swellings, and they are carrying the corticospinal fibers. That is why the name of the pyramidal tract is derived from the region of the pyramid of the medulla. The modalities which are carried by the pyramidal tract, which is the corticospinal tract, is the impulses that regulate precise and voluntary muscular movements. So they are controlling the voluntary bodily movements. They are arising from the motor cortex of the cerebrum, and they are of two types: the corticonuclear and or the corticobulbar, and the corticospinal type. Corticospinal fibers are reaching till the level of the spinal cord, and the corticonuclear corticobulbar fibers reaches the level of the cranial nerve nuclei. Now, as we had seen in the previous class, there were three sets of neurons of primary, first order, second order, and the third order neurons. In the motor tracts, the pyramidal tracts or the corticospinal tracts, we have two sets of neurons. So this arrow, the first arrow is showing the first order neuron, which are called as the upper motor neuron. These are called as the upper motor neurons. Lower motor neurons, they are at the level of the spinal cord. So they are upper and lower motor neurons. Now, what are upper motor neurons? Upper motor neurons are basically the cell bodies of pyramidal cells which are lying in the cerebral cortex. This is the cerebral cortex and there are pyramidal cells over here. And the cell body, the pyramidal cell body, one of the component of upper motor neuron is this. The cell body is lying in the pyramidal cells. Now the second arrow is denoting the axons of the pyramidal cells or the upper motor neuron. So these are the axon of the upper motor neuron which are descending down the cerebrum and reaching the level of the brainstem till the level of the spinal cord. So this is the axon that is terminating into the lower motor neuron which is lying at the level of the spinal cord. So axons of the upper motor neuron or the pyramidal cells are ending, they will terminate at the level of the anterior horn cells or the motor neuron which is lying at the level of spinal cord in case it is corticospinal, and in case it is it will end into the cranial nerve nuclei if it is corticobulbar or corticonuclear tract. So what are basically upper motor neurons? This is a very important concept. The upper motor neuron is basically the pyramidal cells, this over here, pyramidal cells and its axon together. This is called as the upper motor neuron. The axon and the cell body of the upper motor neuron will extend from the cerebral cortex till the level it is synapsing with the lower motor neuron. So till this point, from here to here, this is the pyramidal cell and its axon together contribute the upper motor neurons. Now, what are lower motor neurons? Lower motor neurons are the neurons which are present at the level of the anterior horn cells of the spinal cord. So, in case of corticospinal, it will be the anterior horn cells or the motor neuron of the spinal cord. And in case of corticonuclear fibers, it will be the cranial nerve nuclei which is lying in the brainstem. Their axons are the peripheral processes which are reaching till the level of the skeletal muscle that it is supplying. So, the lower motor neuron will be the neuron which are innervating the skeletal muscle. So from the cell body to the peripheral process, that is the axonal process, this contributes to the lower motor neuron. So anterior horn cell and its axon is basically the lower motor neuron. So this is a very important concept to learn about the corticospinal tract. Unless you don't know about the upper and lower motor neuron, you won't be able to understand the lesions in these areas. Now, corticospinal tract, as I've just told you, they are going to arise from the cerebral cortex. So majority of fibers, they all arise from the precentral gyrus. This you already know from the demonstration of the cerebrum, that there is a motor area, area number 4. The large sized pyramidal cells are called as the giant bed cells. From here, the majority of fibers are arising. There are few contributions from the premotor area number 6 and the sensory area also, post-central gyrus and the parietal cortex area, but the majority fibers arising from the motor area, area number 4. So this is the location of the pyramidal cells over here. And where do they end? They end at the level of the anterior horn cells. Now these are the areas in the brain from where the corticospinal tracts are arising, but remember the majority area from the motor cortex area number 4. Now corticospinal tract, once the fibers, the upper motor neuron is lying in the cortical level, and from there they descend through the posterior limb of internal capsule. This is the internal capsule area, which is a white matter of the cerebrum. And in the posterior limb of internal capsule will be done in detail later on. So from the posterior, this is the posterior limb of internal capsule. This is a gymnu and this is the anterior limb of the internal capsule. So from the posterior limb of internal capsule, the fibers will reach from the cerebrum and will reach the posterior limb. From the posterior limb of internal capsule, now what will be the first area of the brainstem? That will be the midbrain. So midbrain ka, this is the anterior most part, which is called as the cerebral peduncle. Crus cerebri. So from the middle part of the crus cerebri, midbrain, this is the anterior most part, which is called as the cerebral peduncle or crus cerebri. So it passes through this middle portion of the crus cerebri in the midbrain. Then see it, where will it reach? It will reach in the pons. Now what happens? Pons will have pontine nuclei, certain nuclei in the ventral region. So from the ventral region of the pons, these fibers will be interspersed with the pontine nuclei and the fibers will be dispersed at the level of the pons. So you can see each individual fibers dispersed along with the pontine nuclei at the level of pons. Now what is below the pons? Below the pons you have the medulla. Now this is the anterior most part of the medulla. Remember that picture I showed in the medulla. I showed the anterior most part of the medulla, which was pyramid. So in the upper part of the medulla, these fibers will be concentrated on both the sides. They will appear as pyramidal swelling. So this is the region of pyramid in the upper part of medulla. Now what happens in the lower part of medulla? In the lower part of medulla, if you remember in the sensory posterior column, we did the sensory decussation. Similarly, the pyramidal decussation, or this may be called as the motor decussation, is taking place just below the pyramid at the level of the lower part of the medulla. So you can see these descending fibers from the cerebral cortex. These descending fibers, the majority of fibers, 70 to 90% of fibers are going to cross posteriorly, are going to cross to the opposite side and will turn posteriorly. And very few fibers, approximately 5% fibers, will continue to descend down in the same side as from the pyramid. So they will continue to descend down into the spinal cord. So the majority of fibers which have crossed posteriorly and laterally, these contribute to the lateral corticospinal tract. So the fibers that have crossed in the opposite side, posterior in direction, then will descend downwards and will continue as lateral corticospinal tract. What will happen to the rest of the fibers? Only 5% of the fibers that has not crossed from the level of the motor decussation or pyramidal decussation, that has continued and going to descend down in the anterior funiculus of the spinal cord as the anterior corticospinal tract. And the lateral corticospinal tract descend along the lateral funiculus of the spinal cord. This is the area where you have drawn the lateral corticospinal tract. So this is the course of the corticospinal tract. And then you can see the blue dots over here at the spinal cord level. What are these? In the anterior horn, these are the motor neurons. These are the motor neurons, and which are going to be synapsed by these corticospinal tracts, and they are ultimately going to supply the skeletal muscle. So we'll see this course in subsequent slides. So till this point, I think you are clear. So we'll again briefly describe this. This arrow was denoting the motor cortex area, cerebrum, and this next arrow was, it descended down through the posterior limb of internal capsule. It reached the midbrain, where in the midbrain the crus cerebri part, the anterior most part in the middle. Then it reached the pons and was interspersed with the pontine nuclei. And then in the upper medulla, it formed the pyramid. And in the lower medulla, it decussated, crossed to the opposite side at the level of the lower pyramid, showing the pyramidal decussation. And 70 to 90% fibers which descended down contributed to lateral corticospinal, and the remaining 5% which remained on the same side, that formed the anterior corticospinal tract. Now let's see what how the lateral corticospinal tract is now further descending. So lateral corticospinal tract is anterolateral to the posterior gray column, and it is lying medial to in relation to the posterior spinocerebellar tract and lying where into the lateral white column, lateral white funiculus. So this lateral corticospinal tract basically descend down at all the spinal levels up to the S4 levels. This is almost throughout the spinal cord levels. It is descending down. Now, let us see this expanded view of the spinal cord level. What is happening to the lateral corticospinal tract? So this is the lateral corticospinal tract which had descended over here. Suppose this is this particular level. So this was a corticospinal tract. So from here, the fibers from the lateral white funiculus, the axon are going to synapse with this second order neuron, or you can say the lower motor. We do not call first and second order, we call it lower motor neuron. So this is a lower motor neuron ka cell body where the lateral corticospinal tract is synapsing, and this is the axon of the lower motor neuron which is supplying the skeletal muscle. Right, so this is the final course of the lateral corticospinal tract, how it synapses with the lower motor neuron of this side. So the lateral corticospinal started from the this side, from the suppose this is the right side, and it is going to synapse with the motor neuron lying onto the opposite side. So this is the motor neuron through which it was anterior horn cell, we call motor neuron, or the anterior horn cell, with which they are synapsing at all the levels. So that progressively the size is going to diminish from above downwards, the size of lateral corticospinal tract. Now let's see what happens to the anterior corticospinal tract. So where is our anterior corticospinal tract? Below this pyramidal decussation, the rest of the fibers which is descending down, this is the anterior corticospinal tract. So this the anterior corticospinal, almost 10 to 25% of fibers, they lie very close to the median fissure. This is the anterior median fissure. So you can see this is lying close to the anterior median fissure, and they are extending till the level of the upper thoracic. So they are limited to this. So you can see the anterior corticospinal, you can see this is in this particular diagram till T4 they have drawn. So this is extending till the cervical and upper thoracic regions, and they are obviously smaller than the lateral corticospinal tract. So what happens to them? The lateral corticospinal tract are going to then this is the anterior corticospinal tract. So the anterior corticospinal tract will cross, because they were descending down on the same side from where they were arising. So they are going to descend down in the same direction. So the crossover will take place at the spinal cord level. So you can see, can you see this fiber? This is then crossing at the level of anterior white commissure. It crossed and it reached the opposite anterior gray horn cell, and with the anterior horn neuron or the motor neuron, it is then synapsing. So anterior corticospinal tract, which were descending down on the same side, because it didn't cross at the level of the medulla, but finally it will cross at the level of spinal cord, and this anterior corticospinal tract will also supply the motor neuron on the opposite half of the body. So by this picture, it is one thing is clear, that the corticospinal tract, if arising from one particular side, when they descend down, the majority fiber cross at the level of pyramidal decussation in the medulla and then descend down at the spinal cord to synapse with the motor neuron of the same side of spinal cord. Or the anterior corticospinal tract, which descended down in the same side, then later cross at the spinal cord level to supply the motor neuron on the opposite side. So in both the conditions, the corticospinal tract is majorly supplying the opposite half of the body. So they are crossing in the midline through anterior white commissure, supplying the anterior horn cells of the opposite side. So the role of the corticospinal, both lateral and anterior corticospinal tract, is origin from one side, and these tracts are going to supply the motor neurons onto the opposite side. But very few fibers, like 5% fibers, may supply the motor neurons of the same side, that too in the neck and upper trunk region. You can see over here. So this on the same side, that is very few fibers. Very few fibers may supply to the same side. So that was all about the termination of the corticospinal tract, the origin, course, and termination. The first picture we had already seen in previous lecture, that was the somatosensory distribution. And the motor distribution of the somatotopic representation of the body of the motor is the lower limb, the genital area onto the medial aspect, and the rest of the body over here, depending upon the more skillful movement, they will be represented more in the body, in the cerebral cortex, and the body is almost upside down representation in the motor cortex area. Now, what is the function of corticospinal tract? The corticospinal tract is involved in control of voluntary and skilled movements of the body. So basically, they were the peripheral process, they were supplying the skeletal muscles. So they are contracting the skeletal muscles. That is why they control voluntary movement of the body and skillful movement of the body. They are basically facilitators to the flexor muscles, and they regulate sensory information also, which are passing through various ascending tracts. And this is through that, because from the somatosensory area also some few fibers are arising. So that is how they regulate the sensory information as well. They are also involved in the superficial reflexes, are also mediated through the corticospinal tract. These superficial reflexes are abdominal, cremasteric, and plantar reflexes. I'll tell you about these in subsequent slide. So these are the functions of corticospinal tract. So at birth, the corticospinal tracts are unmyelinated. The myelination of these tracts appear after birth only, and this myelination is complete by second year. That is why the infants are able to walk only after the myelination is complete. Now we come to the lesions of the corticospinal tract. So understanding of these lesions, before we understand them, we should know the tract, the course of the tract in complete view. So let's begin with the first type of the corticospinal tract lesion, which is the upper motor neuron lesion. Now, you think what could be the upper motor neuron lesion? Upper motor neuron lesion will be the portion of the corticospinal tract, which is upper motor neuron. Upper motor neuron was from the cerebral cortex till its axon, which was synapsing with the anterior horn cells. So till this point, from this to this point, this is the upper motor neuron. Any injury till this point will be called as the upper motor neuron lesion. The lower motor neuron lesion will be the anterior horn cells and its peripheral process. That will be the lower motor neuron lesion. So basically, at the internal capsule, the lesions are often causing the opposite side hemiplegia, opposite side paralysis. Why? Because if this is cut, this tract was supposed to supply the opposite half of the body. So obviously, this will lead to hemiplegia, that is paralysis of the opposite side of the body. So skeletal muscle paralysis will occur below the level of the lesion on the same side, on the opposite side, sorry. So now the symptoms that arises from the corticospinal tract is the spasticity. Spasticity, increased muscle tone on the opposite half of the body. These are the rest is the increased knee jerk reflex, loss of superficial reflexes, appearance of Babinski sign, which is dorsiflexion of toes after stroking of the sole of the foot. I'll come to these points or these symptoms in detail in subs. Now, let's see, this picture is showing paralysis, spastic paralysis, characteristic of upper motor neuron lesion of pyramidal system. So in this, what is happening? There is spastic paralysis of muscles on the opposite side of the body, in which the muscle tone has been increased. There is increased muscle tone. So obviously these, the cause will be the upper, basically the corticospinal, the upper motor neurons, they were descending onto the anterior horn cells. So anterior horn cell ke upar jo control tha by the upper motor neuron, that has been lost. So basically upper motor neurons are kind of inhibiting the, controlling the anterior horn cells. So this control of upper motor neuron on the anterior horn cell is lost. So because of this, the spinal motor neurons becomes hyperactive, and this leads to spastic paralysis of the muscle. Now this is Babinski sign. The Babinski sign may the sole, the plantar aspect of or the sole is of the foot that is stroked. You can see the clinician is stroking the medial aspect of, this is the course through which from this aspect the stroking is taking place. This is a test. And in case of corticospinal tract lesion, there will be positive reflex will be fanning of the toes, and this is negative one. So if you can try it on your own foot, if you do this reflex, this is the normal response. Why? This is called as a withdrawal reflex. So this is the normal protective instinctive reflex that you do whenever there is stroking. This is a withdrawal reflex or a protective reflex that a normal person does. So there will be dorsiflexion and the flexion of the toes will be there. So this is a normal reflex. But in case of corticospinal tract lesion, where there is a withdrawal reflex has been lost, all the responses, withdrawal responses has also been abolished. So there will be this fanning out of all the great toe. So all the toes. So this is the positive Babinski sign. So this is because of the damage to the corticospinal tract. Because in a normal condition, the corticospinal tract was inhibitory to the anterior horn cells. So does not involve withdrawal reflex to occur. So the withdrawal reflex, this is the normal withdrawal reflex. So this is how from a painful stimuli, the body is trying to withdraw itself. So by dorsiflexion of toes. So this reflex is not maintained, and that is how this positive Babinski sign, in which the great toe becomes dorsally flexed and other toes fans outwards. This is the Babinski sign, which is present in case of corticospinal tract lesion. Now, what are the superficial reflexes? These reflexes are also lost in case of the corticospinal tract lesion. if you stroke the abdominal muscle, so these all reflexes in the patient, in a normal person, if you do, there will be a contraction in the abdominal reflexes in the abdominal muscle area. Similarly, if the stroking of the inner aspect of the thigh is taking place, this will lead to elevation of the testicle. This is the cremasteric reflex. So these are reflexes which are regulated by corticospinal tract. The reflex arc is disrupted, so these reflexes will also be absent in case of corticospinal tract lesion. Now there is one more test, which is the knee jerk reflex. Because of the absence of the central control or the inhibitory control over the spinal motor neurons, there is exaggeration of the knee reflexes. So the knee jerk reflex will be more intensified. So this is a hammer which is held by the clinician, and he hits upon the quadriceps femoris tendon. So this is also exaggerated because the spinal motor neurons which are innervating this muscle, the quadriceps femoris muscle, becomes hyperactive. So this was a reflex arc which should be normally there, but there will be exaggeration of this knee jerk reflex in case of corticospinal tract injury. So till now we have seen what was the upper motor neuron. Upper motor neuron was the pyramidal cells and its axons of the pyramidal cells, and we have seen its injury. Lower motor neuron was the anterior horn cell and its axon. That was the lower motor neuron. So you now know the concept of upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron. Now let's see the upper motor neuron lesion and lower motor neuron lesion. When the patient comes, how will you differentiate? So you know what are the upper motor neurons and what are the lower motor neurons. Now, what will cause the upper motor neuron lesion? Any lesion to the pyramidal cells, and its pyramidal tracts are basically axons of pyramidal cells, okay, cell bodies in the cerebral cortex. So these damage till the level of the spinal cord level. So this damage will lead to upper motor neuron lesion. And if the motor cells in the anterior horn of spinal cord is damaged, or the cranial nerve nucleus motor cells or axons in the peripheral nerve. So basically in this particular diagram, if this motor anterior horn cell and its peripheral process, this is damaged, this is lower motor neuron lesion. And if pyramidal cell and its axon is damaged, that is upper motor neuron lesion. So group of muscles are affected in case of upper motor neuron, whereas in lower motor neuron, because it is at the spinal cord level, only one peripheral nerve is supplying one particular muscle, so single muscle will be involved. So these are differences you must know. So the muscles are not completely paralyzed, but voluntary control is lost, and due to loss of higher inhibitory control, what kind of paralysis? Spastic paralysis, in which the tone of muscle is very is heightened. Reflex arc is intact in this. Whereas in case of lower motor neuron, there is flaccid kind of a paralysis. That means the muscles are completely paralyzed. Muscle tone, reflex arc is totally abolished, and the muscle tone will be very less. So flaccid kind of a paralysis is there. Because it is completely paralyzed, there will be atrophy of the muscle, which is called as disuse atrophy. Here, the atrophy will be very mild. We had seen that there was loss of all the superficial reflexes, but the tendon reflexes, they were exaggerated. Here also there is loss of the reflexes. Babinski sign will be positive in case of the upper motor, whereas in lower motor it cannot be elicited. So positive Babinski sign in the upper motor neuron. So these are the differences between upper motor and the lower motor neuron lesion. Now, pyramidal tracts were corticospinal and corticonuclear. So a brief about the corticonuclear tract. Corticonuclear tract, as the name suggests, from the cortex to the cranial nerve nuclei level. So first order neuron, they will be present in the motor cortex, and then they will descend down into synapse with the motor neurons of the cranial nerve nuclei at the level of the brainstem. So fibers of the cranial nerve nuclei, they are going to innervate the muscles of eye, the facial muscle, the tongue musculature, and the throat. So they are involved in voluntary contraction of muscles of larynx, pharynx, palate, face, jaw, and eyes. Here the reflex that is checked is the jaw reflex, right? So these are the muscles which primarily the head and neck muscles, which are supplied by the corticonuclear tracts. So if we see this diagrammatic representation, you can see that the innervation of the corticonuclear tract is going to innervate all the cranial motor nuclei bilaterally. So if in case of this upper part of the face, if you can see, there is bilateral representation, except the lower part of the face, which is innervated only from the contralateral side. So this is the lower part of the face. Baki rest of the nuclei, they are bilaterally represented, except the lower facial muscles, which are only contralaterally innervated. So these are the arrows. You can see upper facial muscles are bilaterally innervated, but the lower facial muscles are only innervated contralaterally. Differences between now the lesions of the corticonuclear tract are the bulbar and the pseudobulbar. Similar to the upper motor neuron lesion and lower motor neuron lesion, here also you have nuclear and supranuclear lesion. So these are basically, this is the lower motor and this is the upper motor kind of a lesion, and because depending upon the cranial nerve involved, these could be the symptoms of the bulbar tract, bulbar and the pseudobulbar lesions. Now coming to the extrapyramidal tract or the extrapyramidal descending spinal tracts. So we know that the pyramidal tracts are involved in the control of voluntary movements or skilled movements of the body. So why do we need another descending tract, extrapyramidal? They are going to control the coordinated movements of the body of limbs during walking and regulates the tone of musculature, posture and equilibrium. These are the functions of extrapyramidal tract. So we have these rest of the tracts like tectospinal, which is involved in visuospinal reflexes and muscle tone. For body posture, rubrospinal. For equilibrium, we have vestibulospinal, and the rest of the two reticulospinal, olivospinal tracts are there. So anything apart from corticospinal tract, whatever tracts, descending tracts we have, they are the extrapyramidal tracts for coordination of movements. Now tectospinal tract. Tectospinal tract is a spino-visual tract which is involved in the impulses for reflex postural movements in response to visual and auditory stimuli. So in response to visual and auditory stimuli, you have reflex postural movements. Like if you hear something or if you see something, your entire body will shift towards that source of stimuli. So this is brought about by the tectospinal. As the name suggests, tecto means tectum of midbrain, and tectum of midbrain, this is the cut section of midbrain. So the tectum of midbrain at the level of superior colliculus. This is the superior colliculus. So it starts from the tectum of midbrain, which is superior colliculus, and descends down at the level of the spinal cord. So the first order neurons are lying at the superior colliculus level. And then you can see at the level of midbrain only, it is going to cross to the opposite side, and this crossing over from both the sides will contribute to decussation. Two decussation we have already done in the previous class. We did sensory decussation, and today we have done the pyramidal or the motor decussation. This we are talking about the decussation of tectospinal tract, which is called as the dorsal tegmental decussation. This is a dorsal tegmental decussation. So this fiber has now come to the opposite side and is going to terminate into the upper four cervical segments over here. So they are basically, why only cervical? Because they are basically innervating the muscles of neck, because postural reflex in response to visual and auditory stimuli. So this blue tract is denoting the tectospinal tract. Now adjacent to it, arising from the same midbrain, you can see another tract which is again crossing at the level of the midbrain and descending down. This is arising from the red nucleus of the midbrain, and this also crosses but more ventrally, so causing ventral tegmental decussation. This tract is called as the rubrospinal tract. So the second tract, extrapyramidal tract, which arises from the red nucleus, then crosses over, is forming the ventral tegmental decussation, descends down to the second order neuron, which is the alpha motor neurons of the ventral horn. So they are the rubrospinal tract. And what are these for? These are for the facilitator for the flexor muscle tone, and so they will be facilitating the motor neurons for the flexor muscles. They will be inhibiting the motor neurons for the extensor muscles. So this is the role of rubrospinal tract. Vestibulospinal tract for the body equilibrium. So vestibulospinal tract will arise from the vestibular nuclei. So this is the vestibular nuclei, pontomedullary junction. This is a cut section of So they are of two types, lateral and medial vestibulospinal tract. So they arise from the vestibular nuclei and terminate at the level of the spinal cord. So each termination and origin you will come to know by the name of the tract itself, vestibular nuclei to the spinal cord, involved in the body equilibrium. So the first order neuron of the lateral vestibulospinal tract will be arising from the lateral vestibular nuclei. The lateral vestibular spinal tract is involved in the facilitatory to the extensor muscle. Rubrospinal were facilitatory to flexor. Here this is facilitatory to the extensor muscles and inhibitory to the flexor muscles of neck, back, and upper and lower limbs. So basically they are maintaining the extensor muscle tone, the lateral vestibulospinal tract. That is why the equilibrium is maintained. Medial vestibulospinal tract, as the name suggests, will arise from the medial vestibular nucleus. This is a medial vestibular nucleus denoted by the red color. And this is for the inhibition. This function is to inhibit the muscles of the neck and the back. Reticulospinal tract is basically regulating the muscle tone of anti-gravity muscle. They are medial and the lateral reticulospinal tract. They are facilitatory to muscles of trunk and limbs, maintain body posture, and modifies the transmission of pain impulses as well. The last is the olivospinal tract. Olivospinal tract arises from the inferior olivary nucleus, which is present at the level of the medulla. And it reaches where? It reaches to the neurons of the anterior horn of the spinal cord. The function is to control the movements in response to proprioception. So in this one picture, you can see all the extrapyramidal tract from the reticular formation and from the lateral vestibular nucleus. This is a vestibulospinal, this was the reticulospinal tract, and this is the olivospinal tract. So how will we summarize the extrapyramidal tract? Why do we need them? We require pyramidal tracts for controlled voluntary activities, movements, but for controlling and coordinating these movements by affecting the muscle tone, by maintaining posture and equilibrium, controlling the motor reflex activity. These are the roles of the extrapyramidal tract. And if in case pyramidal tracts are damaged, there can be certain voluntary movements can be possible by the extrapyramidal tract. So these are the differences between the pyramidal tract versus extrapyramidal tracts. Pyramidal tracts were corticospinal and corticonuclear, arising from cerebrum to the spinal cord, arising from the cerebrum to the cranial nerve nuclei. Extrapyramidal are from the subcortical areas of the brain, reticular formation, from the superior colliculus, from the red nucleus, from the vestibular nuclei, from the olivary nucleus, terminating into the spinal cord. So they were from the cerebral cortex, they were from the subcortical centers. They both were acting onto the anterior horn cells, but they were acting directly onto the anterior horn cells, and these were acting indirectly through the polysynaptic connections. They are in the pyramidal are involved in the voluntary skillful movements, and whereas these are involved in the inhibition and facilitation of the flexors or extensor reflexes, muscle tone, and equilibrium. The lesion of extrapyramidal tract will lead to increased spasticity, increased tone, clasp knife rigidity will be there, and over here there will be loss of skilled voluntary movements and increased muscle tone. Again, spasticity will be seen over here also. Now we come to the last aspect, the applied aspect of the spinal cord. So spinal cord can be injured by trauma. Is the most common trauma through accidents is the most common cause of spinal cord injury. There could be some degenerative conditions of the spinal cord. There could be demyelinating conditions. There could be tumors, infections, impaired blood supply. Impaired blood supply is altogether a different lecture and a different part that you will do subsequently. So we'll be doing first, we'll do the injury to the spinal cord, complete transection, and then we'll do the hemi transection of the spinal cord. So now look into this picture. This is the spinal cord, and if there is an accident, there's a trauma where the entire spinal cord has been transected, or you can say has been injured. The entire spinal cord has been injured. So what will be the lesion? So if this is the spinal cord, now try to see what all tracts are there in the spinal cord. Posteriorly, what do you have? You have posterior columns. right? And then what do you have over here? You have the anterior horn cells in the anterior horn, gray matter. Over here you have the lateral corticospinal tract. Over here you have the anterior corticospinal tract. Over here you have the lateral spinothalamic tract for the pain and temperature. So suppose the entire spinal cord has been injured. So what will be the effects? All these tracts will go. All these tracts will go. So these are going to lead to the anesthesia, total anesthesia, loss of sensation and motor function paralysis. So paralysis and anesthesia, that means loss of all the sensations and loss of all motor functions below the level of injury. So suppose this was the level of injury at this particular spinal cord level, suppose for example T7. So below T7, all the sensation and the motor loss will, motor functions will be lost. And the complete transection of spinal cord, there are two stages. One is the stage of spinal shock followed by post-spinal shock. So once the patient immediately comes acutely conditioned, so he will be in a stage of spinal shock followed by post-spinal shock. So this is a patient, suppose complete transection of spinal cord, he will come in a stage of spinal shock, which is lasting till the 3 weeks. In this, there will be flaccid paralysis of all the muscles below the level of transection, because there is absence of all reflexes, superficial and deep, by lack of stimulation from the higher centers of CNS. All sensation, muscle tone is completely lost below the transection. All the autonomic reflexes, what are those reflexes? Urinary bladder rectum reflexes for urination and defecation, they will be abolished. So there will be retention of urine and feces in case of these patients. This will be followed by a stage of post-spinal shock, which is after the spinal shock. So in this stage, the functional activities will reappear. Functional activities will reappear first in the smooth muscles, and this will be followed by the reflex defecation and urination in response to the stretch. So smooth muscles of the bladder and the rectum. So here the functional activities will be appearing first. So the reflex defecation urination in response to stretch will start. Second to appear is the somatic reflexes. They will reappear. So these somatic and autonomic reflexes will be exaggerated. Then the tone of the skeletal muscle is last to return slow. So the tone of skeletal muscle will slowly return. So from the flaccid paralysis, what will happen? Spastic kind of paralysis will appear. So this is a spastic paralysis. This is reappearance of the spinal reflexes. So spastic paralysis, in this spastic paralysis, what happens is there is chronic flexion of the hips and the knees. Later limbs become straight and rigid. So this is the state of the spastic paralysis. So spinal shock and then post-spinal shock, those are the two stages of the complete transection. Now, the patient of transection of spinal cord, if now the level of injury is quite important here. If the level of injury was between T1 and L1, then the patient will come with paralysis of both the lower limbs. This is called as paraplegia. So the patient will not be able to move his lower limbs, both the lower limbs. This is called as paraplegia. If the paralysis was above C5, that means the brachial plexus and lower limb both innervation has been lost. So all the skeletal muscles have been lost, the innervation. So that is quadriplegia. That means both the lower limbs and the upper limbs, they are, and the trunk muscles, they are all paralyzed above C5. Between C5 and C7, we call it partial quadriplegia. So these are the symptoms with which the patient will present in case of complete transection. Now, very important part is the semi section or the hemi section of the spinal cord, or the Brown-Sequard syndrome. This is called as the Brown-Sequard syndrome. Now, in this picture, see, this is a normal and this is the abnormal. So the lesion has only affected the one side of the spinal cord. This is called as hemi section of spinal cord, also called as a Brown-Sequard syndrome. The cause is the gunshot injury. Most commonly in gunshot injury, you have the hemi section of the spinal cord. So lateral half of the spinal cord is damaged. So what will be the effects? Now the initial one, the complete transection was quite easy because you know everything is lost. But here you have to remember what all structures will be lost. So again, see, this was the area of posterior column. This is the dorsal column. This is the area of corticospinal tract, lateral corticospinal. This is the area of lateral spinothalamic tract. Remember this picture and then remember what will be the effect. So if the corticospinal tract is paralyzed, corticospinal tract is injured, what will happen? There will be paralysis of the muscle. Which muscle? Ipsilateral paralysis of the muscle. And what will happen to the sensory? There will be extensive contralateral sensory loss. Autonomic functions will be minimally changed. So changes below the level of hemisection. What are those changes? So see, first of all, we'll see the motor loss, corticospinal tract. So once over here, because from the lateral corticospinal tract, over here the motor neuron will be innervated and it will reach to the same side. So in this, the ipsilateral hemiparesis will be there. Half side of the body will be paralyzed below. Suppose the hemisection was at the level of T4, so all the motor functions below that lesion, T4 level, that will be affected. This is called as half side of the body paralyzed. So hemiparesis or hemiplegia, ipsilateral one. Right, and then about the posterior column. Now let's see posterior column. The posterior column carries what all sensation? It carries fine touch localization, tactile discrimination, conscious proprioception, vibration. Everything is lost, and these are damage that has taken place, and they will be onto the ipsilateral side. Why ipsilateral side? Because the cross has already taken place at the level of medulla. Dorsal column, remember where they were crossing. The dorsal column, they had to cross at the level of medulla. So, but because the lesion is at the spinal cord level, so you will have these the loss of position, vibration sense, they will be on to the same side. Now spinothalamic tract, this is the spinothalamic tract. Now remember, spinothalamic tract को कहाँ cross करना था? At the level of spinal cord through the white commissure, and then it had to ascend up. So over here there will be loss of sensation, because there will be loss of sensation to the pain and temperature sensation to the opposite side in case of spinothalamic tract. In case of lateral corticospinal tract, which is a crossed pyramidal tract, all the skeletal muscles below the level of lesion will be paralyzed onto the same side, because it had to go to the same anterior horn cells. But what about the anterior corticospinal tract? Anterior corticospinal tract had to cross from the level of the spinal cord. Hence, the some of the opposite side of the muscles will escape injury, and that is why some muscles on the side of injury are not paralyzed, but majority of muscles or upper motor neuron type paralysis will be seen on the same side. So this is very important, comes in your exam, Brown-Sequard syndrome, and these are the changes that takes place in the Brown-Sequard syndrome. As of now, there is very little, almost negligible, no treatment available, because nerve fibers in CNS do not regenerate after damage. The only hope in the future is the embryonic stem cell therapy. So only prophylactic treatment, that is, or physiotherapy, that is required in these kind of patients. Now, degenerative and demyelinating disorder, this is our last part of spinal cord. So these conditions are syringomyelia, Tabes dorsalis, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and poliomyelitis. We'll go one by one. Syringomyelia. What happens in this? It's a chronic disease. There is formation of cavities in relation to the central canal of spinal cord. This is the central canal of spinal cord. Over here, there is cavity formation. So damage, immediate structure which is adjacent to the central canal is this anterior white commissure. This anterior white commissure is over here. So the most commonly, because this disease involves the cervical and upper thoracic cord segment, so this is confined to the hands and arms, mostly to the hands and arms. What will be the effects? Now try to see what could be the effect of these. Now this central canal ke aage, this is anterior white commissure, and anterior white commissure mein kya ho raha tha? There were decussating fibers of spinothalamic tracts. So loss of pain and temperature in hands and arms bilaterally in the beginning, that will, because from both sides they are crossing, right? But what about the touch sensation? Touch sensation has a double pathway. From dorsal column also it's going, so the touch sensation will be preserved, because it's that posterior column, dorsal column, is quite away from the central canal. The only site affected is this anterior white commissure, where the direct structure that will be involved will be the spinothalamic tract, and that too bilaterally. So this kind of anesthesia, because अभी इससे पहले हमने देखा था sensation of posterior column, sensation of spinothalamic pain temperature, everything was lost. But here this kind of anesthesia is sensory dissociation or dissociated anesthesia, in which there is loss of pain and temperature while touch sensation is retained. So this is also an important question that can come. What is dissociated sensory dissociation or dissociated anesthesia? That means only pain and temperature are lost, but touch is preserved. This happens only in case of syringomyelia because it is involving central canal, only affects the anterior wide commissure, the spinothalamic. Now, the second condition in patients of syphilis. In patient of syphilis, there is an immunological response, Tabes dorsalis, in which we did in the previous class also, degeneration of the central process of the spinal ganglion cells. So this is the area which is involved. So obviously, all sensory fibers of dorsal root are affected, dorsal column are affected in this kind of condition. Most commonly, the posterior column. This is the third condition, which is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is the degeneration of the motor neurons. So it will, in this case, you can see the sensory, there will be no loss of sensation. So sensory pathway is almost unaffected, but there will be upper motor neuron type of lesions in case of amyotrophic, and lower motor neuron if will be there bilaterally. Now, this is the last condition, which is the poliomyelitis, in which there is death of motor neurons in the anterior horns of spinal cord. This is lower motor neuron type of paralysis because the motor neurons of the anterior horns are totally dead. So, and also involves the motor nuclei of the cranial nerves. So this is a motor neuron type of paralysis of the lower limb. And the thoracic, in case thoracic segments are involved, there will be failure of respiration because the intercostal muscles will be paralyzed. So the failure of respiration will also take place in case of poliomyelitis. So with this, we are at the end of our lecture now. This is the last slide. Now just try to see these pictures. This definitely should be the complete transaction. This is the Brown-Sequard syndrome involving the central canal. This should be the syringomyelia. This is the Tabes dorsalis, which was involving the posterior root. This is lateral sclerosis, and over here involving the anterior horn cells should be the poliomyelitis. These are the questions that you should be able to answer at the end of the lecture. You should be able to draw, you should be able to trace the entire corticospinal tract. You should be able to differentiate between upper motor and lower motor neuron lesions. You should be able to tell us about the anatomical basis of Brown-Sequard syndrome and dissociative anesthesia. Thank you.